Consulting's like going to the doctor. You go there with symptoms, and through conversation, you determine whether or not you're a good fit to work together. That's how Jeffrey Hire Jones defines consulting, the founder of Spark Evolve, a consulting firm which focuses on small and medium sized businesses achieving greater efficiency and effectiveness through project based work and ongoing fractional leadership. Jones, a former insurance and financial executive in corporate America, says the pivot to becoming his own boss was one of the best decisions he's ever made, but he readily admits it always hasn't been easy. He joined me this week to discuss his entrepreneurial journey and the highs and lows of owning his own business. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. So, Jeffrey, if you're ready, I'll welcome you to the program, and we're excited to learn all about your entrepreneurial journey this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Kevin.
So, Jeffrey, I know that you have an extensive background in both entrepreneurialism and the financial and insurance sector. So, my first question to you is, what do you think is the key to sustainable success when we look at being serial entrepreneurs, which you fancy yourself as?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really think there's two main keys to success when I reflect back on my time in both corporate America and owning a business. And, one I would say is staying curious and always learning. There's so much to learn and you can't be an expert in everything, but being curious and wanting to learn and figure out what's going on in the market with your products, with your services. I'm really just doing that continual learning. The second key that I think is being uncomfortable. It's easy to get where you're comfortable in your career, with your business, and you end up in kind of these, I call them ruts, where, it's just you're on autopilot. And where I've had the greatest success in my career, professionally and personally, is where I've, gone outside that box and went and found things that made me uncomfortable and took those roles and took those assignments on.
And I know that you spent some time in corporate America, and then you decided to make a pivot to run your own consulting firm to help small and medium-sized businesses to be their own fractional chief operating officers. So I'm wondering, what did you learn about yourself during this process? And tell me about the firm that you're currently running.
Yeah, great question. So, learned a lot during that transition. When you go from a corporate environment to working for yourself, oftentimes in a corporate environment, you don't have to be the expert on a lot of things, right? You have IT folks that can help you with computer challenges. You might have a marketing department. You've got all these kind of functional areas that work together to achieve a result. And for me, one of the greatest learnings I've had is making sure that I can find people that can help where maybe I'm not as efficient and it's not a great use of my time. Just knowing that you don't have to have to be able to do it all. There's a lot of experts out there in the marketplace that can help you, whether it's with finance, marketing, building sales pipelines, etc. And that was a big learning for me where, you don't have to just rely on yourself. The transition's been great. A little bit about Spark Evolve that you asked about. I started it to really help small, mid-sized business owners. A number of my friends own businesses, very successful businesses, and part of the challenge is you get into business because you're passionate about something. So I have a particular friend that owns a medical practice that is very passionate about the practice of medicine, not passionate about all the operational tasks that come with owning a practice. So when you think about key performance indicators, having the appropriate metrics, how you measure results of the practice, that's not the area of expertise or the things that they gravitate towards. So being able to help that market that otherwise may or may not be able to afford a full-time, chief operating officer with extensive experience on a part-time or fractional basis has been extremely rewarding.
And I'm just curious, since you've made this pivot, do you have a checklist or a set of criteria that you use to accept or reject clients, or do you want to cast as wide of a net as possible when you work with businesses, when you decide who to work with and who not to work with?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kevin. So for me, I always like to start with a conversation. Sometimes people have some challenges operationally that, to be frank, they could probably fix on their own. With a 10-minute conversation and a little bit of guidance, they can go and take care of it on their own. So I have a little bit of a mental checklist as I'm doing that initial assessment, with a potential client on if we would be a good fit to work together or not. Maybe there's someone else in my network that might give them more of what they need. Oftentimes consulting's kind of like being a doctor. People come to you with some symptoms, and then you've got to, through conversation, dig a little bit deeper to really figure out what the root cause is, and is that a good fit for a fractional COO, or do they need a bookkeeper or an administrative assistant to help with things? So a lot of that is kind of just based on experience and learning to go through and listen and ask follow-up questions to really try to get to what's the root of the challenge that client's facing, and is it a good fit or not.
Now, as you know, we're all living through this pandemic. So I'm also curious to know, since you work very closely with small and medium-sized businesses, what do you think the role of government is to make sure that these businesses survive? And how do you think the business community can survive this climate?
It's a great question. I know it's a hotly debated topic in our state in particular, as many states and governments are kind of interacting with new public health mandates, from mask requirements to shutting down businesses. I think this one thing that this has probably taught the small to mid-sized market is really the need to have some continuity planning for your business. There were a lot of businesses that in March in our state struggled, quite frankly, when the governor shut down non-essential businesses. A lot of businesses, restaurants, bars, gyms, and other companies got shut down. And I think it just goes to, part of an organization's disaster or continuity plan, thinking through these kind of things. Yeah, it was 102 years ago that we had the last global pandemic. But I think it brought about, where you could have some challenges with not having good plans put in place, to address things, or a loss of staff due to, healthcare issues, things sweeping through like this with hospitalizations, infections. I think from the government perspective, some of the stuff, at least the US government's done relative to payroll protection loans that could be forgiven. I think that those things, for us being in really unique times and never being through some of this, certainly help some businesses. I think oftentimes when governments get involved, sometimes there's a little too much red tape. I think they tried to do a good job of not creating a ton, but there was still a lot of paperwork that, really small businesses, I think, struggled with to get approval and, just to get through that process. So I do think that, coming out of this, if you look at least in the US with the number of infections and hospitalizations that we've had over the past couple days, couple weeks, they've been pretty significant, and I think worse than where we were in the spring. So I think that the government definitely, has to play a part and think about, whether it's other rounds of payroll protection as states are thinking about shutting down businesses again. You can't affect small business owners' livelihoods and the staffs that they pay for. That's the backbone of America, is really the small business. And I think without some intervention, we're going to unfortunately see, even more businesses close.
Now, talk to me also about the pivot that you made in terms of your personal fulfillment, about helping people, and also what did you learn about running a business that you may have not known since you're your own boss now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, you know, for me, the freedom, uh, that you get with running your own business. You ultimately answer to yourself. You don't have a boss that you answer to. You don't have a board or shareholders. Has been a really nice transition. And having young kids, I've got probably more flexibility now than I've ever had in my career, in terms of being able to attend for both, home life and work life. And, I talk about it as being more integration. This home life balance that people talk about, I don't think it exists. I think it's really, how do you integrate those two perspectives of your life? Um, from learning, there was a lot that I didn't know. Early, a year and a half ago, I learned how to build a website. I never in 1,000 years would have thought that I would have been building a website for anything. A lot of IT stuff that I've learned. I'm definitely not the expert in it, but, partnering with people that are expert in those things to get help, and just being open to asking for help were really big learnings for me. And how do you surround yourself with people that are also very successful in their niches, where you can lean on one another?
And tell me, what would be your advice to anyone that's looking to make a similar pivot that you did?
Yeah, it's, I think for anyone that's thinking about going out on their own, have a plan. Creating that plan on what your business is, what niche that you want to play in. Can you make money doing it? And even start it as just a side hustle, in addition to whatever your full-time, 9 to 5 job is that you're working on. Start to do that and set some goals for that side hustle. If you want to turn it from a side hustle into your business, how much money would you need to make to be comfortable enough to make that jump and that shift? And then, once you have the plan, just do it. I think so many people wait until the right time, the right opportunity. You can always wait and find an excuse to not move forward and not do something, but it's really, what would your comfort level need to be? And then go out and just make it happen. And you've got to have the confidence that you'll make it. And I'll be honest, there'll be some days that you'll second guess that decision. I've been there, in the last year and a half, where it's like, man, I don't know, what was I thinking a year and a half ago to leave a great corporate job to do this? But, I reflect back on, I've learned a lot the last year and a half. I've grown more personally and professionally, I think, in the last year and a half than I have in the last several years. And it's been an awesome ride.
Now, is there anything about your former corporate life that you miss?
Probably the two biggest things are some of the people that I worked with and those relationships. When you're in an office with a lot of people, you get close with a number of people, you see them every day, they're kind of like family. I miss that. And then to be honest, the other thing that I think is easy to miss is the benefits and the pay that come with working for someone else. Let's just be honest, where that when you work for someone else, that's a lot more steady, right? Every 2 weeks, every month, every week, whatever your pay cycle is, you're going to get this amount of money consistently. Where when you go out on your own, it can be a little bit more of a roller coaster, at least early on getting started, where it's feast or famine. It's I heard someone describe it as kind of hunting. You eat what you kill when you work for yourself, and it is a mindset that you've got to get used to and accustomed to, that it's not, neither one's good or bad. It just depends what you've done the most of throughout your life. If you've always been a W-2 employee and worked for someone else, going and working for yourself is going to be very different, when you look at pay, benefits, and but there's a lot of great things that come with that, and a lot more, I think, upward potential if you've got the guts to go and do it and put the work in.
Now, I know that you have two young daughters, and I know that parenting during this pandemic must be interesting. So, can you tell me, what have you learned about yourself as a parent through this process?
Yeah, I'd say that the number one thing that I learned in the spring in particular is teachers are probably the most underpaid profession in the world. So my son and daughter last year, the last 9 weeks of school, their schools got shut down here in Ohio. The governor shut them down, and the teachers had to scramble, and we all became 100% virtual instruction. So I'm fortunate that my wife's company sent her to work from home as well. So we were able to divide and conquer between the two kids. But the teaching profession and teachers, what they do, and as parents, we teach our kids, but it's a different kind of teaching. That's probably the number one thing that I've learned, is just to have some patience and some grace, because the way that they're learning math in particular is not the way that I learned a lot of years ago. It sometimes doesn't make sense to me. So trying to figure out how they learn and how to explain it like their teachers would explain it, has been a little bit of a challenge. But, some of that is learning to be patient with myself. I'm relearning how to do basic math, because of the way that they learn how to do it nowadays. So, being patient, having grace, and really, make sure you appreciate your teachers, because I think the number of things that our school district, the teachers have done a fantastic job. I mean, I feel for them this year. We're hybrid. Kids are in school 2 to 3 days a week, and it alternates every other week. And the amount of communication and things that they have to do in the classroom and outside the classroom, is more than doubled. I'm certain of it.
Well, I'm sure that we'll all have a new appreciation for Teacher Appreciation Day, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
So I know that you're also a big, you live there in Columbus, so I know you're a huge Ohio State fan and Columbus Blue Jacket fan, so you must be relishing in Michigan's misery this year, huh?
We always do, and we call it the state up north, is how we typically refer to it. And, typically, coming up, probably around this coming up weekend or so would be the typical OSU Michigan game. And it's always fun in Columbus because the M's on street signs all around campus, people's Facebook and profile pictures, they cross out the M's on all words in Columbus during that week. And, had it not been for the pandemic kind of pushing everything further out, this would have been the week that the M would have disappeared in Columbus.
So I know that you also like to travel. So what have you been doing to sort of fill that void and find your inner self during the pandemic, buddy?
Yeah, it's definitely been a shift. Usually we take several trips over the summer as a family. I've got family members that are down in Florida. I've got family in Michigan. We usually go with friends to North Carolina. So you can imagine all of those trips got canceled this year. So we did, my wife's family owns a cottage up in mid Michigan, or that state up north on a lake. So we did get up there because it was a fairly short drive since it's a family owned property. You know, it's not a rental where there's a lot of people coming in and out. It sits on the lake. So we did get up there for 2 weeks this summer. We went planned for a week, went a week in July, and then right before school started, we decided, you know what? My wife had the vacation. I, have the ability to really work from anywhere. So, I did some of my work from the lake. A couple of my calls and Zoom calls like this were, on the deck facing the lake with a cup of coffee in the morning. And then we
Makes for
spent
a
some
good
time.
background, right?
Yeah, the background was awesome, and then we spent some time boating and that up at the lake and just kind of hanging out, and it was good to get away. So it wasn't like most years, but we had fun this summer. The kids, we had the big pool that blows up in the backyard, so they had kind of their pool experience in the 2 foot deep blow up pool that you get from Walmart, and sprinklers and that. So we tried to make the most of it.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with being resourceful, right?
That's right.
So, hey, my final question for you is: if anybody wants to get in contact with you from a business perspective, how do they do that?
Yeah, they can go to www.sparkevolve.com is the company website. Reach out through LinkedIn, Jeffrey Hire Jones on LinkedIn. You can send me a connection request. We
I
can
did
chat.
that this morning, Miller.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And I'll go out there here in a little bit, and usually go out there a couple times a day and accept those. But yeah, you can reach out either of those two ways. Folks could also email me directly if they wanted. It's Jeff, Jeff, at sparkevolve.com.
Fantastic, Jeff. I want to take a few seconds to thank you for your time this morning and sharing your entrepreneurial story with me. I really enjoyed our conversation. I want to thank you for being here this morning. It's most appreciated.
Thanks, Kevin. This was a blast. And hopefully we'll beat that state up north here later next month when we play them.
Well, by the way they're playing these days, it might be a scrimmage for you instead of a game, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's completely okay.
All right, Jeffrey, have a great day, and thanks for your time, okay?
Thanks, you too.
Fantastic, Jeffrey.